Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Monday, December 6th, just about 4:30. And let's get to the market wrap up for today. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only. You can read the full risk disclaimer here. Also, if the video is a little bit blurry, it's just because YouTube takes a while to render the high definition version of the video. So just give it a little bit more time. If you open up the video and it's blurry, close it, reopen it, maybe a half hour, and it should be better. Okay, so let's get into the to the performance for the day. I thought that we had some nice movement today, right, and nice participation for the day. In terms of that market breadth, you could see on the bottom left of our screen, you could see it was this minty green color. And if you want to look at the actual numbers for the day, yeah, the S&P 432 advancing, names 73 declining, Dow Jones 28 advancing, 2 declining, and then Nasdaq, which has been a problem area, 1950 in terms of advancing, 931 declining. So pretty nice. You could see that in Europe, by the way, like how strong their market breadth was there as well. S&P finished up just over 1% for the day. IWM outperformed, was up 2% for the day. The Dow was also very strong today. Dow stocks very strong, up 1.9%. Qs I don't have highlighted, but they did okay too. They advanced. They just underperformed a little bit for the day, up 80 basis points. Just to kind of just walk through how today unfolded. Also, bonds, by the way, sold off throughout the session. After such a big move last week, they gave back some of those gains. They definitely seemed last week like a flight to quality or flight to safety. Big inflows going into TLT last week, and maybe a little bit of an overreaction going into bonds. So yes, today was kind of started to see what I kind of expected in the beginning of the day, where you had some of the defensive areas of the market outperform, but I was a little bit surprised at how bad some of the growth areas got hit today. There was a number of stocks that were down, between like 3 to 6%, depending on the name and the group. But I know everybody takes a look at this ARK ETF, ARKK, that started off the day like down 4%, and came back pretty aggressively. So it did feel like, you could have said this a little bit on Friday too, that it felt like a capitulation in some growth stocks. But, things like this, which finished up for the day, the ARK ETF up 1.5%. But yeah, I believe it took out this version point of control down here, right, which is from this all the way back in here. So really nice bounce off of that for growth stocks, and we'll kind of have to see where this group goes. And I think as you kind of go through some of these growth charts, you're going to see a pretty healthy bounce in some of these names. The semiconductors, things like NVIDIA, AMD, these things were also down huge to start the day, down like 5-6%. There was some dip buying in those names. Typically, that's what you kind of see when, NVIDIA is down that much. It's kind of viewed as a buying opportunity, I think anyway. And you could see it come right back and finished basically where it opened, which was down about 2%. But I mean, this was a pretty healthy washout, right? If you want to look at the 5-minute chart for NVIDIA, again, just a very interesting price action. I mean, all the way down to 280, right, on the first 10 minutes of the day, just really got hit hard. And just interesting how that happens. But yeah, you could see the price action moved all the way back up. We did see momentum call buying a little bit after that those two red bars, and things kind of built from there. So you had this going on, and then you had things like utilities, which got off to a great start, and it just seemed like a very defensive tape. Now, they did not finish on their highs, right, the utilities, but just I thought that this was just an interesting move to see what was going on here. Notice, and this is why I didn't really want to load up on any of this group, because we did take out one of these virgin point of controls. So it's kind of one of those things where if you positioned into this, maybe you were taking some gains in the defensive areas of the market. XLP was another group that we talked about. The consumer staples showing some strength as I was going through my weekend scans. And, this was another one. I mean, the consumer staples, they don't usually move this much, right? 1.7%. So I know you kind of look at this and you look at some of the growth names and you're like, it's not that big of a deal. But it is for this group of stocks to see it up this much. You just don't normally see that much. And the ETF that I've been talking about that is this group is low volatility equities, SPLV, which is up 1.3%. So again, kind of moved with what the market did today. What did SPY do? Was it 1.1? So outperformed the overall S&P, the low volatility equities, and that's something that we'll kind of continue to watch to see if we see more money being kind of put to work in this group of stocks going into next week's Fed meeting, as well as we've got a CPI report later in the week. So I think investors are kind of hiding out in some of these stocks, and you kind of have to go through and kind of figure out if there's some that you want to own in this space. I like the water stocks, for instance, right? So like an AWR, hit 52-week highs. I also like this one, AWK, which is close. And you'll see this in a bunch of names. They got very close to kind of turning that corner, but didn't, couldn't finish the deal on the day. But nevertheless, what we're doing too on days like this is, putting together our watch list and watching how names, if they're going to close on their highs or if they're just basically, bouncing. So, the phrase that I'm going to say a couple times here, and then we'll go back and we'll look at the indices. But one day is not a trend. So, just remember that. And if we go to the S&P, which I haven't talked about yet, but so a couple of things that I wanted to see kind of coming into today was I wanted to see price get back above the 5-period moving average. You heard me talk about that in Friday's video. I also talked about that in the member video this weekend, in the macro video. So we got above the 5-period moving average, so that's a good thing, right? That's the first kind of step in this process. The 20-day moving average would be nice too. Remember that the 5-period moving average crossed below the 20, which is a sell signal. So now that kind of has to be reversed. And, I also wouldn't be surprised if we go kind of sideways here for a little bit and just work off this high volatility. We came into the day and the VIX was, a little bit north of a 30. At the end of the day, we're down to a 27. So that's progress, right? Not that I want to chart look too much at the VIX, but let's see if the volatility begins to kind of come in a little bit. All right, we're still kind of jumbled up here, around this 27 to 30. So I would really like to see us kind of get back below, first maybe 24, then 22. Right? These are it's confirmation, right, that that volatility is subsiding a little bit. So that's what I'm looking for. Also, I use the 1-hour charts quite a bit when we're going through something like this. By the way, we'll have some resistance up here at 46.32. Right, that's the bottom of value for the month. But we also, when futures opened last night, we started in value. We kind of came back and retested right around at 6 o'clock in the morning. I mentioned European equities were strong. So we're just, you can see I've got a trend line drawn, right? And I put this out earlier because the first attempt on this today kind of failed a bit. But we managed to, actually it wasn't really much of wasn't a failure. It's probably the wrong word to use. But yeah, getting back above this downtrend line, that's also a good thing too, right? I mean, that's a bit of a change. It's something that we couldn't do since we broke down back in here, right? We've been making lower highs, right? Lower high here, lower high here, lower high here. So this is a little bit of a change in pattern, right? So again, we just have to build from here, right? And we could come in and we can kind of back test this thing as long as we do this. Right, so overall, I think pretty constructive. I think in the growth names, there's a lot of technical damage. So, I participated a little bit, and we saw some call buying in Datadog. which again, the technicals like this to me it's a tough play, and I size this appropriately on a tough play, but I don't like to really go after names that are below the 50-day moving average. So that's why I took a couple targets in this today. It's nice to be able to kind of get involved in a name and take some money off the table in the trade, the same day, and then you can leave a little bit on for a runner. That's been a tough strategy the last couple weeks, where if you hit a target or two and you leave the balance on, the way that this market has been very wishy-washy, where you get a nice positive day and then you get a washout day, then you get a positive day. So let's see if we can actually string, a couple days together for this group. Just some other names to kind of glance. So I went over S&P. I didn't go over NASDAQ, the chart, but I really think that looking at the S&P is a little bit more advantageous. This is also inside value, so 15,800. Or if you want a level for the Qs, notice that the Qs. So again, they're going to be a little bit different volume profiles. They're going to be a little bit different. So different value areas, different volume profiles too. Remember, the value areas are created off of the volume profile, right? So level to watch here is going to be right around this 386.50 level. All right, and then IWM. Different looking picture. That's going to have some resistance right around 221. Again, whenever I'm looking at the 1 hour chart, it's short term resistance. What else to kind of go through some other names? The home builders, right? We talked about them a lot last week. We talked about them in the middle of the week, talked about them towards the end of the week, but really, that's where relative strength has been in this particular group. I don't know of a stronger group right now than what's breaking out. Most of them are breaking out to new highs. Right. Previous weeks it's been the semiconductors, but for right now it's this group has been very hot. Toll Brothers out to new highs. DHI out to new highs. New closing high, it looks like, not intraday, but new closing highs. GRBK, which a couple traders traded in the room today. This is Green Brick Partners. Look at this monster candle today in this group. So, this is where, so there's definitely, pockets of strength in this market. Obviously, with the way that the market breadth has been, there hasn't been that many pockets of strength, but, this has definitely been one of them. The other thing that we talked a little bit about was the transportations looked, some areas looked pretty strong. Look at CSX today, right? So, it's tough to get that negative on the overall market when you've got things like this going on, right? When you've got CSX breaking out to a new high today, right? And the home builders, right? As well as the semis, which saw a little bit of profit taking, I think, and a little bit of weakness because of the cryptos. But I think also, again, not just this one, but if you look at UNP, this one's very close. Then if you go into some of like the trucking names, Knight Swift also up 3.8%. Right. So the difference here, the names that I tend to go through are names that are in uptrends, the names that are acting really healthy. I will play a little bit in the sandbox of names that have kind of gotten beaten up, but I won't take the same position size in those names because a lot of times those names will bounce, but then that's all they'll get out of them. So you've heard me say that over if you're a regular viewer or if you're a member of Tribeca Trade Group. ABNB very strong today. All the travel stocks were the strongest, one of the strongest groups today. I don't have the Jets ETF on this spreadsheet, but they were up at one point. I think they didn't close on the highs, but they were at one point up like 7-8% for the day, up 5%. The airline ETF, Jets, JETS, Jets. Yeah, I mean, obviously they got the travel names got really beaten up when we heard about more of these travel bans and so on and so forth. So when you lift that, what do you think is going to happen to these names? Same thing with the casino names. But again, some of these casino names are just going to go back to where they were before this happened, right? So it's tough to really say. And again, you could see, Las Vegas Sands is basically back into this region, and you're going to have some resistance up at 38.78. So if you played for the bounce, congratulations. If you thought that it was an overreaction with this COVID variant, remember something different happened in between these names. The travel names and the overall market. The travel names were more affected because you did have, politicians putting in travel bans. It's different than the overall market. But, when you do that, obviously these things are going to be much more sensitive. A few other names just to mention too: Starbucks, which I view as a reopening type play. Just this also. Right, just like I mentioned with another name a second ago, which was a utility. Look at where this thing closed. Right, it did not close for a breakout. I still like this name long term, and I actually added this into the TTG trend portfolio today. But still, like for like a more tactical trade, it's got to get above 114. Right, and just interesting to me that it just couldn't close above value. Right, so some of these, that to me tells me sometimes that it's a one-day move rather than a change in trend. McDonald's was another one, right? Again, these names may not be on your radar, but how many people are talking about McDonald's making a new all-time high today? So again, I try to bring some different things rather than the same names that so many eyes are looking at. Amazon I thought made a nice move today, up 1%, but it ran into resistance at 3463. So again, you got that one-day bounce, but I would pay attention to that 3463 and a very tough-looking chart to me. All right. Just to show you what I traded for the day. Again, I've been really kind of paying attention to the volatility in this market and being conservative with how I trade and making adjustments as I talk about in a lot of my videos. But I took Lennar. Lennar was a name that I tried last week, and I just didn't want to get caught in a lot of risk before the weekend. I actually added to this, changed my mind, and took it off. Well, I went back into it today. Not that big of a deal. So a couple of the names that I talked about, right? I took ACA was another one. That's showing breakout potential. Did finish to new highs. So we'll see if some of these things can run a little bit now that they're out of value. I mentioned Datadog. I took a small trade in Datadog. Unity Software was one of those names that started red but went green. We'll see if this can build off of this. Again, it's below the 50-day moving average, which I don't love, but let's see if it can kind of base and start to recover in here. All right. And then one other name too to kind of mention, solar name, right? Kind of best in breed in the solar space. Came into the 50-day moving average, basically retesting where it initially started to get going. I think this is a good place to try a trade versus the 50-day moving average. I did structure this as a small option trade to start. Again, I don't want to add a ton of risk today because of the way that this market has been, but I'm a little bit more optimistic and positive. Given the price action and the move in breadth. Like that's, if you would have asked me what I wanted, and we talked about this in Sunday's video, what I wanted to see, many of the things that I talked about are kind of checking the box. Remember too how we kind of finished the week last week, right? We finally got that complacency kind of pushed out of the market, a little bit of fear in the market. We saw the put call ratio, and then the thing that stood out to me too was credit spreads. Right, credit spreads were not going berserk last week. Right, when you've got major structural issues in the market, credit spreads will really begin to widen. And when I say credit spreads, what we're looking at is the spread between the U.S. Treasuries as well as high yield credit. Right, and what stood out to me is we started to see things, really kind of look dicey. Right, in terms of what we were seeing in equities. However, fixed income, we got a little bit of a move off the lows, right, in credit spreads, but look at it come right back in, right? And even on Friday, which was besides that move at the very end of the day, looked the same thing. Looked a bit looked rather dicey to me, but we did not see a big rip up higher in credit spreads. So that to me was one of the major things that I saw on Friday, and we certainly talked about that in Friday's video. We talked about it in the macro video too, is saying, hey, this might just be another episode of volatility. So we don't know that for sure because, like I said, it's one day is not a trend, but certainly things started to move in the right direction, and I do like this bit of confirmation that we're seeing that credit spreads are not widening out here. Right, not indicating major trouble in the fixed income market as of yet. All right, guys, I'll leave it here. Have a great night, everybody, and see you tomorrow.